So I tested it on marigolds, and the reason why I did this is because they're fast-growing plants, they're fast-blooming, and they germinate in 70 to 75 degree conditions, which is basically the temperature of my house around that. And so they also flourish best in the sun. So I put them all on the windowsill and rotated them all so they all had equal sunlight. So the pros and cons of organic and chemical fertilizer. The organic is more expensive. It improves the plant's roots and soil fertility for the extra price though. And it also reduces the chance of runoffs because it has a slow release of nutrients. So runoff is the overflow of water, which usually occurs because of a rain or snowstorm. And this can affect our drinking water if it gets into rivers, or animals' drinking water if it gets into puddles and things like that. The chemical fertilizer is a lot cheaper, and it works faster and has a more immediate effect. However, it can burn roots and foliage and also pollute water through runoff, because with that immediate release of nutrients, it's not having that slow release, which decreases the chance of runoff. It's all happening at once, so more chance of runoff. So the hypothesis for this experiment was that if organic and chemical fertilizers were placed in the same type of plant with the same conditions, that the organic fertilizer would have a better effect on the plant than the chemical fertilizer would. So the materials that we use for the chemical fertilizer, we use Miracle-Gro. For the organic, we used Organic Plant Magic, and we used French marigold seeds, and those are just the rest of the materials that we used to conduct the experiment. So for the procedure, we planted the marigold seeds. We watered half with organic fertilizer solution, half with chemical fertilizer solution every week. Watered them in between when they were just dry with the same amount of regular water. Rotated them, like I said, and just observed them every week. We measured them, every few days actually, we measured them. And that was about it for procedure. We did that for around 8 weeks. So in the hypothesis, I mentioned better effect. And so what we did for better effect, we took into account the growth increase, the germination speed, and also the soil texture. So the winner, chemical or organic, it's time to find out. And the winner was organic because it had all of these things that I mentioned. It had the greater growth and germination speed, which you'll see in just a moment, and it also had the better soil texture. So we actually observed that all of the organic plants each retained a lot of moisture for a lot longer. So it was all very moist when the chemical had completely dried out. So this is the average growth of the organic versus the chemical. The organic's in the solid green, and the chemical is the dashed red line. So from the beginning, we see that the organic has the higher growth, and it just continues to create a distance between it and the chemical. And at the end, we have about a 17.8% difference in the heights. However, I also included this of the individual plants that we have. And so the solid ones are all organic again, and then the dashed are chemical. So we see that the chemical all stay pretty consistent in this small little area, whereas the organic, there's two really high up, but also the two of the shortest ones are also organic. So there's more of a wide variety of results with the organic, whereas chemical was very consistent. So this is for the last day of experimentation, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. The top are all organic, at the bottom are all chemical. And the organic, we see that 04 is kind of struggling there. It's not doing super well. But organic 6 is very high, flourishing, and all the chemical, for the most part, are pretty consistent with the results. So this is after the experiment finished. During the experiment, we actually didn't see the flowers bloom, but this is since then. You see 3 of the organics have bloomed when only 1 of the chemical had bloomed. So we also saw that the organics were able to bloom faster than the chemical were. Oh. Sorry, I'll just have to fast forward again. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, there we are. So since then, all of them are pretty much looking exactly the same. They all flowered, so I just wanted to show that even though the organic increased the amount of time it took, decreased the amount of time it took, they all eventually got to the same basic spot. So the conclusion, the hypothesis that the organic fertilizer would increase, well, it would just have a better effect on the plants was correct. However, like I mentioned, the two tallest plants were organically fertilized, and the smallest was also organically fertilized. So we're not sure what accounts for this. It could be something with the seeds or something that just didn't turn out well, but we're not going to necessarily fault the organic fertilizer for that, since there was a 17.8% difference in the averages. And another thing to keep in mind is that the organic fertilizer, we actually did do a larger serving size because that was recommended on the guidelines. So if used in the same amount, the chemical might be more powerful. We wouldn't probably have the soil texture that we saw in the organic, because that's particular to that. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. Another thing is that the chemical, of course, was the cheaper option with the less serving size too, so that accounted for, that's an extra thing with the cheaper. And I think when used to guidelines, organic is probably the better option. So for the overall conclusion, if you care about plant quality, being the height, the soil, the growth quickness, and also the environmental impact, especially if you're planning on planting your plants outside, then I would suggest organic. But if you're on a budget, definitely understand if you want to use chemical fertilizer, that's also great. And it, of course, improves the plant quality, but not as much as organic. So yeah, that's about it.
I have a question for you. Did you ever consider using no fertilizer as a baseline?
Yes. Yeah, we did consider putting just a control where we did none, but we ended up not doing that just because we wanted to have, we only had 12 marigolds. We couldn't like plant too many because it was just in my house, so we wanted to make sure that the averages, you know, being able to have like a lot so that the average would turn out correct, because as you saw, we saw a few random ones, that were really short in the organic, ones that were really tall, so we wanted to make sure the average was about like right for how much they actually impacted the plant.
Why didn't you decide in your dosing to do equal dosing?
Just because we wanted to go with the serving size that it recommended. We didn't realize that, we kind of thought that chemical would have initially the higher growth, because that's kind of what it's known for, to have a more immediate effect, and organic would go over time. So we didn't think that chemical would necessarily be a lot less powerful in the end. We just decided to go with serving size.
And the question I have, Alex, fascinating that the organic had that very widespread and the chemical had been narrow. Have you given any thought to why, what would explain the chemical having the narrow band, that they all kind of grew about the same rate?
I think because it's probably more precise, being all the chemicals in there. Organic is all just organic materials and everything. So chemical, they probably exactly measure everything to just be in that one little space, whereas organic's all over the place, you know.
Thank you.
So which do you use in all that?
Well, I haven't really been able to test it out because, it's just the beginning of spring, but I'll definitely use organic.
All right. Thank you.